Go ahead. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And hello, everybody. I'm so excited to see over 80 people attending our session. I know we were just saying as the speakers that it's kind of in that point of the day where a nap seems pretty nice. So good on you all for hanging on. Welcome to our session titled Employing Students as Partners in Open Educational Resource Creation. Before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge that our speakers are situated in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, both in Canada and on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The Mi'kma'ki is covered under the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, originally signed in 1726, and then was not surrendered by the British Crown. We continue to live and work on their lands, and we are grateful for the opportunity to be here with and amongst you all today. So really quickly, my name's Tiffany MacLennan. I'm a recent graduate from St. FX University. If any of you've ever seen The Ring, you'd know all about it. Some of us are all around the world, so hopefully you have heard of it at least once. Megan and Kim will give you a second to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Megan Landry, and I'm a scholarly communications librarian at St. FX.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Mears, and I am the Health Sciences and Scholarly Communications Librarian at the University of Prince Edward Island.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for attending us all. We hope that you learn a lot from the next 18 minutes according to my clock. But through this session, we hope that you can gain an understanding of the role of students as partners in open educational resources, as we can walk through and evaluate some of the mutual benefits for students and faculty partnerships and how that works, both literature backing and in practice. And then of course, reviewing how to hire and train students for OER creation. So before we dive in too far, we wanted to hop into a term that was used in our title, which is students as partners, which is a literature term, it turns out. It's been my area of research as a research fellow and strategist for the Maple League of Universities. And basically, what a student as partnership is a partnership that's built on kind of values and using a partnership that is based on being on an equal playing field and not having kind of a power structure hierarchy. So the partners, in this case, student partners, are held to the values of openness, trust, honesty, so that we can share our experiences and work together rather than working on different levels. Where this becomes important, of course, is, as undergraduate students like myself who recently graduated, there's sometimes some struggles when working with people who you think are a lot more qualified and older than you. So student partnership and students as partners as a field looks at how do we create meaningful partnerships built on trust and equal playing fields in order to ensure that we actually can leverage the best and most creative and conductive environments for both partners. With that said, I'll pass it over to Megan.
Hey, thank you. So before I get into this, I wanted to talk a little bit about why it was helpful for a definition of the concept of student as partners. So I erroneously initially thought this simply meant a student working on OER creation with a faculty member, but the role of the student as partner is a lot more complex and meaningful than that. So to understand how students as partners can serve as solutions to barriers, we need to understand some of the barriers that exist in OER creation. So this is a quote from Henderson and others in 2018. So research into OER use, perceptions, costs, and outcomes is becoming more prevalent. However, it is still in its infancy. Understanding barriers to full adoption, administration, and acceptance of OER is paramount to fully supporting its growth and success in education worldwide. So there are many barriers, and most of which I actually won't be delving into today, but as per Henderson and others, this includes copyright support and understanding, open licensing initiatives, perceived quality, difficulty finding relevant materials, and resistance of educator participation in OER use. However, I have chosen 4 important barriers that I believe can be mitigated with students as partners. So the first is financial, which includes the cost to create, implement, and maintain an OER. And for each of the barriers, I've come up with a possible issue and a possible solution. So the issue here is that OERs are expensive to create, and faculty support incentives are oftentimes not enough to cover the faculty members' time. So a possible solution in this case is using incentive funds to hire and pay students for OER creation. Moreover, hiring students is more economical sometimes than hiring a staff member. Resistance to students as partners, an issue of power dynamics. As per the research from Seal, Gibson, Haynes, and Potter, this can be a really big obstacle to overcome, but it must be addressed. So the issue is that students don't ever feel truly equal, and expectation of subject matter expertise from faculty members is high. So the solution in this case, in this article, is students play a unique role of both consumer and partner. If we continue to ignore issues of power and resistance, we will fall short of the vision of student engagement and the ideals of strong participation and expression of student voice. This one includes technical support or technical infrastructure and digital fluency, as this can serve as a barrier to some. So the issue is that there is a learning curve to using new software and the platforms that are used to create OERs. The demand for technical support can sometimes be moderate to high. A solution is many current students are both digital natives and digitally fluent. They bring the unique perspective of the consumer and provide invaluable information on how they interact with technology, as well as feedback on accessibility. And my fourth barrier is lack of time and resources, which also plays into the financial barrier as well. But I'm specifically referring to the effort and the amount of time it takes to research, create, implement, and maintain an OER. So creating OERs can take a lot of time and effort, especially at institutions like my own, where there's a lack of faculty support and incentive programs for creating OERs. So the solution in this case is self-explanatory, but students as partners are more equipped to take on an equal role in OER creation, thus cutting down on the time to create one alone. And that wraps up my 4 barriers that I'm discussing today.
Awesome.
Thanks, Megan. So Tiffany is now going to talk about the benefits for students.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So this kind of builds upon the last point that Megan discussed with the lack of time and resources and using students as partners to kind of bridge some of those gaps. So Megan walked through a lot of the issues and then some of the solutions to working through some of these things. But I wanted to kind of phase it into also just the benefits. So pass a little bit at issue solution and more into what do you actually get from doing partnerships like these. So the first one is the benefits of student partners. So looking at faculties and librarians. What are the benefits that they receive from working through these processes? The first one is the ability to create relationships with students and act as mentors. One of the things that I hear often from the faculty that I work with is that what they do is for the students and that they love the input directly from their students, and being able to create relationships with their students and act as mentors acts as a really great kind of motivation to continue working on projects like these. The next one is make contributions of OERs promoting accessibility and inclusivity. As we talked about many times today, and as you all know, there's a variety of ways in which OERs are able to promote accessibility and inclusivity within our higher education and beyond landscapes. So being able to engage as a faculty member within that is always great. The last one I have at the bottom is spend time on meaningful aspects of OER creation. And I mean this kind of in a twofold sense. So working with your students, developing these projects and working on a lot of these really great things like creating textbooks, creating different educational materials, but as well as, you know, maybe not doing some of the things you don't like and some of the things that maybe are not your strengths, because when you have partners, you can lean on each other's competencies. So for example, I might know everything about Pressbooks, but maybe my professor knows nothing about Pressbooks, or probably vice versa, because I learned about Pressbooks about 3 months ago. So being able to work on the things that mean a lot to you in your OERs, but also being able to use the things that kind of play to your strengths initially. The next one is the benefits for student partners. So looking at what do the students get from working with this? And this comes back to a lot of the research that I'm doing in my current role. And this comes down to doing things like creating OERs and having meaningful partnerships with your faculty comes down to something that's known as a high impact practice, which is basically educational activities that give incredible results to students if they participate. So there are a few things that make a high impact practice, and one of the biggest ones are that you create relationships between faculty and students where they can gain frequent feedback, create relationships, and that the students are spending time on a meaningful topic. So when you're creating an OER, fluent discussion is a must, fluent conversation is a must. And students are spending a lot of time learning the material that you're putting into your book, trying to find new material, adopting, adapting, creating, whatever it may be. So this falls well into the category. And then from a student side, and having worked through some of these myself, but these ones are backed by literature as well, students often see increased GPAs, increased faculty-student interactions. If you use NESI on your campus, which you likely do, there's an increase in deeper learning, which they coin as a big one. I'm not too deep into the NESI data myself to really know, but increased student retention and understanding of open education and open education contributions. From kind of a personal standpoint, working through these projects, what you get is experience and a network and a community and people to kind of engage with and learn more from. And that is a really big deal, especially if you're an undergraduate student who is just trying to make their way in the world and figure out what A to B is. So having an ability to work on a meaningful project for your peers and the people well beyond the scope of who you know, but also you get a tangible item at the end, which is really great. That said, I will pass it over to Kim so we can talk about how do you actually land with students as partners?
Yeah, so I'm going to, in this section, I'm going to talk more about the mechanics of actually implementing students as partners. So we're going to go over how to hire students and how to train them. So first, I thought I would, begin by mentioning some of the funding. I will acknowledge that this is not comprehensive and it's very North American focused. I was only able to locate one international foundation that would provide some kind of support, financial support to the creation of OERs, which is the Shuttleworth Foundation Fellowship Program. And that does focus on providing funding for one project, one faculty member. So it is limited. They do only have just a few fellows in that program. I also just want to take the time to kind of give a shout out to an initiative that Tiffany and Meghan and I are part of called OER Atlantic that's going to be launching pretty soon. That is an initiative that looks at or includes a lot of the Atlantic provinces, or all of the Atlantic provinces. And it's an initiative that we're working to get it launched, and it will have grants and it has press books for our institutions. So it may be very familiar if you have heard of BC Campus or eCampus Ontario. So that would be the same kind of initiative, but this is more regional. The Future Skills Center is a Canadian organization that has several Canadian institutions that can apply for grants. And then also the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, also kind of colloquially known as SSHRC. They provide partnership engaged grants. There's also Affordable Learning Georgia. That is also a statewide initiative. So like I've mentioned, there's plenty more. I just wanted to mention a few. And I also want you to take time to maybe look at your university to see if there's a Student as Partners program. I've listed 2 Canadian institutions that have this, but I also maybe wanted to mention like library student assistants. So I know in my university, we engage our student assistants in all kinds of projects. And I know in the past we have engaged one student assistant who, when they weren't working on our service desk, that we did include them with helping with some OER stuff. So there are some creative ways to get some funding, but like I mentioned, this is not comprehensive. So I wanted to have a little bit of conversation about why we need to pay students as they're completing this kind of work. So according to the CNBC, there was an article that talks about internships and how much it can cost a student when you factor in tuition, housing, transportation, meals, that kind of thing. And it's around 13,000 US dollars. So that's how much an internship can cost a student in a very median or average kind of a city. But if you go to those higher cost cities, that it's even more than around $13,000. So you can see how that's maybe unmanageable or unattainable for students who are not in a position to be able to work for free. I think back to my time as a first generation university student, and I took a full load of classes and worked 30 hours to be able to afford university and to pay my bills. And I think back and think I couldn't been able to take an unpaid internship and be able to complete my university degree and be here with you now to give this presentation. So we need to consider equity and inclusion and diversity and think about how if you were to offer an unpaid internship, you're basically saying or making an internship that's unavailable to a vast majority of students. And that would be not ideal to already cut your population down. And we want to give many people opportunities to participate and, gain the expertise and the knowledge needed to be successful after university. And as people are mentioning, unpaid, internships don't value the labor that students are going to be participating. And if they're partners and equals into your project, then they deserve to also get paid. So just a little note on that before we move forward. So let's talk about how do I actually hire a student. So I want you to be aware of some of the things that human resources may require of you. For example, at my institution, the amount of pay varies by the level of work. So if you are hiring an undergraduate student, but they're doing graduate level work, you still have to give them a graduate level rate. It does not matter the actual status of the student. It matters the level of the work you're asking them to complete. Also things to consider is that you need to maybe include vacation pay or statutory benefits included in your funds. So you want to make sure that you have enough funds to be able to pay the student their rate, but then also those additional things that HR asks you to do. And you're going to spend a lot more time on onboarding and orientation than you think. You want to be able to prepare the student and give them the tools and resources that they need to be able to be successful in this position. So some of the roles that I was able to find in the literature include mentor. So an example of a mentor is at the University of Queensland. They led a project in which students with disabilities, a variety of disabilities, and also with mental health concerns, they served as mentors for first-year students who also had a disability or had the lived experience of a mental health concern. So that is definitely one role that students can serve as a partner. As far as like a consultant or a co-designer, Bryn Mawr College in the United States, they have a long-standing program where students act as pedagogical consultants. So they provide work for up to 7 hours a week to a faculty member. The faculty member applies to this program and the university funds it, and the student can analyze curriculum. They can actually support the revision of classroom practices. And it's really as a partner to the faculty to be able to do this kind of thing. There's also additional roles such as a researcher, or if you wanted to be able to have a student create an app for your course, that's also something that has happened in the past. Okay, let's go ahead. As far as training students for open educational resources, so this is more specific to OER, you may need to start at the bottom and talk about open access and open education. You want to be able to give the students the confidence to be able to serve or not to serve, but to play an equal role in creation of the OER. So these are just some of the areas in which you may need to train the student. Okay, we can go ahead. So student as partners, here's some examples at UPEI. So we have development grants for OERs in which we provide faculty funds. And we actually have employed students to be able to work in press books and be equal partners in the creation of OER. We also worked with the student union to hire a research assistant who did a survey of faculty on our campus to see who was using OER. And then lastly, we had a service learning project with a communications class to have a student work on a marketing initiative related to OER. So we're running a textbook champions marketing campaign at UPI. So that'll be coming out soon.
Hey, Kim, we're
As
all
for
done.
references, and we went over just a little bit.
I didn't want to interrupt you. We're going in a good place.
Yeah. Yeah, so welcome any questions.
Maybe from over here, I'll stop sharing my screen. We have our contact information there. You can see under each of our sections, we have open to discuss. Myself, I have open to collaborate, as I do have a little more free time than some others, but I'm more than happy to discuss. Will you make the slides available? Absolutely. I'm not 100% sure how, but we will get them to you somehow.
Tiffany, I think there was also a question earlier on in the chat, and maybe I could read that out, but so it's from Barbara, and she said, has anyone tried to simply take some of the scholarship money, comparing students' grades who submit applications and pairing them with the course they may take next, asking them to come up with questions and PowerPoints, discussion questions, etc., while taking the course? Scholarship plus time in course for an A could quickly create more OER courses. I understand math, English, literature, foreign language might be harder and possibly unable to do this as easily, but there are some that could be very achievable over a semester. I'd work for a scholarship.
Kim, do you want to address that to see how kind of UPEI does that?
Sure. That would definitely be something to consider. We don't have a current partnership like that now, but that's a really great idea. Yeah, I would also have worked for a scholarship back to a university, and yeah, I definitely think, the great thing about students as partners is there's just so many different types of partnerships that can happen that there's no way that we could have gone over all the different kinds of initiatives. Having a student as a pedagogical consultant, that seems like really great to me as a librarian. I would very, very open to that kind of thing. So I think there's just so many different kind of partnerships that we didn't go over today.
One that Tiffany actually told me about through Bishop's University is there's a program where they hire students as online learning specialists, I guess, and they almost function as like an instructional designer and helping to design online courses and provide feedback on accessibility and that sort of thing. So Tiffany just sent it in the chat, and this is kind of somewhat related, and her and I had talked about a little bit, like, wouldn't that be really useful if those students kind of came together and created an OER on the work that they do for universities that don't have those programs, and I think it would be really useful for that. And somebody mentioned work study. Now, I don't think St. FX or UPEI has work study, and that's, from my understanding, maybe somebody could correct me, but that's for students who express a financial need for work. And so I don't know, I'm assuming something like this could be like used for work study, but somebody might want to jump in and clarify that.
Yeah, and one of the ones that I didn't have time to mention was that at the University of Western Ontario, there's a one semester course called University Science Education, and they actually start with just a very open syllabus that just has basic like administrative information and broad educational outcomes. But then during the first 3 weeks, the faculty facilitators collaborate with the students, and they come up with the expanded learning outcomes, specific learning activities, assessment rubrics, due dates, and course policies. I mean, I couldn't imagine if I got into a course and then realized like, oh, my voice, and I'm a partner in this course and I get to help determine what happens in this semester. I think I would have felt a lot more engaged.
There's there was a message earlier on too from Adam. So he had asked, what are your thoughts on open pedagogy, which has students create the OER, but the power relations are unequal?
I think as long as students are acknowledged, and they definitely need to have authorship on materials and acknowledgement. And if you continue to use those, there needs to be an authorship role on that. So I think that would aid in that power dynamic.
Kim and I had talked about this earlier too, because we're new to the literature on student as partners, and we were asking each other, why would one hire a student as a partner in contrast to, say, hiring a staff member that is, let's say, knows more about the subject area and maybe knows a lot more about the platform and that. And I think, because, as I mentioned, students bring a very unique role as the consumer as well, that the mentorship between the student and the faculty member, does take a little bit more time and effort, but the end result is a lot more meaningful because, again, the student provides a lot of perspective on the end user experience. And with the power dynamics, allowing the student to have an equal voice and representation is really important, because if not, that could discourage the student in the future from speaking up and using their voice in different types of, student engagement initiatives and that sort of thing.
Michelle, maybe we'll let you stop the recording at this quick pause.